Welcome to Arapahoe County, Colorado. I'm here with Senator Tom Cotton. Senator, thank you so much for joining us today. I saw you a little bit earlier today. You had the chance to go out with some law enforcement officials in Jefferson County with Joe Day and really get a sense about what's been happening here in Colorado as far as the fentanyl problem and the crime problem. What did you see today, and how does it compare to what you've seen across the country in your travels?
Well, unfortunately, what you're seeing in Colorado is what we've seen in a lot of states. As a result of failed Democratic policies, you're seeing a crime wave. I think Colorado now is one of the #1 states in the country for car theft. Not exactly what you want to lead the nation in.
No.
We also heard from some of the sheriff's deputies about just how many Coloradans we lose every year to fentanyl, which is just a microcosm of what's happening all across the country. You know, we lose now more than 100,000 Americans every year to drug overdoses. Yeah. And in the case of fentanyl, I wouldn't even call it an overdose. No one says I'm going to take some fentanyl and takes excessive dosage.
Yep.
It's almost always laced illicitly into something else or presented as something else. So it's really a form of poisoning.
It is.
And when thousands of Coloradans are losing their lives to fentanyl poisoning, Colorado may not be on the Rio Grande, but it is a border state. And that's why it's so baffling that Michael Bennet has been a rubber stamp for Joe Biden's open borders policy. 5 million illegal aliens have come into our country in fewer than 2 years of Joe Biden's administration, and that's made it that much easier for cartels and gang members to smuggle in these deadly poisons that are taking the lives of our fellow citizens. Joe Day will help put a stop to that when he gets elected to the Senate, but Michael Bennet will not.
It is baffling. We've heard from law enforcement officials here in Colorado that we have Mexican drug cartels operating in the state. These drugs are coming over the southern border. Two questions. Number one, why won't these Democrats take any action on securing that southern border? And then also on top of that, we know that a lot of the supplies that go into making fentanyl are coming over to Mexico from China. Nothing happens in China without the approval of the Chinese Communist government. What do you have to say about them shipping this poison over to the United States that, as you said, is killing thousands of our citizens here in Colorado and across the country?
Well, I think the Democrats are putting their left-wing ideology above the interests of the people of Colorado, above their safety and their prosperity and their well-being. So, for instance, Democrats long ago abandoned the idea of border security. Now they want to even abandon the idea of borders because of their globalist worldview. They think borders are somehow nativist or xenophobic. So you can imagine what they think of actual border security. That's why Michael Bennet has consistently voted not to finish the wall on the southern border, not to fund the Border Patrol, even as he is funding 87,000 new IRS agents. Then second, they also put their ideology about criminal justice ahead of the safety and well-being of our citizens. Michael Bennet has had repeated chances to vote in favor of, say, longer sentences for fentanyl traffickers or more funding to crack down on the cartels, and he consistently votes against it. Or Democrats in Washington want to bargain it off, like you want to give longer sentences for fentanyl traffickers, okay, well you got to give us something in return to let more prisoners out of jails or not send them there in the first place. Yeah. Playing with the lives of so many Coloradans who've been killed by this deadly poison.
It's truly unbelievable. To switch gears here for a second, I have a few more local questions to ask you about Colorado. One of them that we've covered extensively at Campfire, Colorado, is this new universal basic income project that's going on in the city of Denver. They've decided to award $12,000 of taxpayer money coming from Corona money, federal dollars, to homeless individuals in Denver as part of a universal basic income test. We found through our reporting there's no safeguards around this going to drugs and alcohol. They can use it to buy whatever they want. What's your take on that program and just on universal basic income projects around the country in general?
Well, I think you're probably going to get a lot more homeless people in Denver if you start giving them blank checks that they can use on drugs or alcohol or anything else. And you're probably going to get homeless people from outside of Colorado coming here because they know how good the deal is. Look, we need to do a better job of taking care of the homeless in America. That starts with getting them the mental care they need, because in many cases they're on the streets because of mental health challenges, helping them the treatment they need for drug addiction, which is another main cause for homelessness in this country. Just giving them money with no strings attached and not worrying about how they're going to spend it is not going to solve anything about the homelessness crisis in America. It's only going to make it worse.
Yeah. We in Colorado obviously have the Air Force Academy down in Colorado Springs. The Washington Free Beacon reported recently that there was a presentation that occurred to cadets urging them not to use gender pronouns, not to use the word terrorist also when talking about people. What's your take on a program like that, and then more generally these woke policies that are creeping into our military and our military leadership, and how does that affect our ability to fight and win wars across the world?
Well, no one joins our military to learn how to use the right pronouns. They join our military to learn how to kill the bad guys. And it brings discredit on the Air Force Academy to have this kind of training in place there. So I've demanded answers, and I hope that the superintendent there takes it seriously, and if he didn't know about it, I hope that he takes remedial action promptly. It is very consistent, though, with what I've heard across from other academies or other commands down our military. There's really no place for it in our military. Our military has a great record of racial integration and success stories. Remember, we integrated our military just a few months after Jackie Robinson broke the color line. Minorities today in our society are actually overrepresented in the military, especially at more senior ranks of command sergeant major, for instance, and first sergeant.
Yep. Then
their share of the population. That doesn't exactly sound like a racist institution or a place where minorities can't get ahead. And when I was in the military, I and the battle buddies I had didn't really worry about who was white or black or Latino or Asian. What mattered more to us than the color of our skin was the colors of the flag we wore on our shoulder when we went into battle. And we need to put an end to it. A new Secretary of Defense, a new President can put an end to it on day one. But if we elect Joe O'Dea and other Republicans to the Senate, we can start down that path next year. So for instance, I had an amendment this year to the defense bill that would have capped out the salary of so-called diversity consultants in the Pentagon at the salary that we pay an E5 team leader. Think about it, an E5 sergeant who's out walking point, the most dangerous position in an infantry formation, is making less than a diversity consultant is. That shouldn't happen. If we have a Republican Congress, it won't happen starting next year.
Joe O'Dea, he's running against Senator Michael Bennet. You're familiar with the Bennet family in one way, which is that you published an op-ed in the New York Times a few years back that Senator Michael Bennet, his brother, resigned after you published the op-ed. Tell us more about that, your thoughts on free speech. Have you ever talked to Michael Bennet about that entire situation?
I've not talked to Michael Bennet about it. I have actually talked to his brother since then about it. I think his brother was basically run roughshod by the far left employees of the New York Times and their far left readership, and the ownership of it. The family that owns the New York Times simply wouldn't stand up for the editorial decisions they had supported just a few days earlier. But it's just an example of the creeping kind of authoritarian mindset of the progressive left in America, whether it's in an institution like the New York Times or in corporate America that's trying to insert itself and substitute its judgment for elected officials, or in universities and colleges and big tech. Really the only places in America where conservatives can have a fair shake at getting their voices heard are in the elected parts of our government, the presidency, the Congress in Washington, our state legislatures, our governors in our states, and local government. And that's why it's so important that Coloradans get out and make sure their voice is heard. Joe O'Dea will be a voice of common sense for the people of Colorado in the Senate. Michael Bennet has been a voice and a rubber stamp for Joe Biden's radical agenda in Washington.
100% true. Our last question, we ask everybody that we talk to this question. Campfire Colorado is a conservative voice for the people. You're in Washington, D.C. all the time. How do you maintain a sense of humility while you're there and a sense of serving the people instead of becoming part of the culture in Washington, part of the political class? How do you maintain that when you're in Washington?
Well, having a 7 and 5-year-old in the United States Senate will help do it to you. Not many senators have 7 and 5-year-olds, maybe 7 and 5-year-old great-grandsons. But being a dad of young kids keeps me grounded and keeps me focused on the kind of concerns that parents all across the state of Arkansas have, just like parents here in Colorado will have. Keeps me focused on what their priorities are, not the priorities of Washington, D.C.
Beautiful. Senator Tom Cotton, thank you so much for joining. We appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in. Stay tuned for more exciting content coming from Campfire Colorado. If you haven't yet had the chance, sign up for our morning newsletter, Campfire Coffee. It's only $5 a month. It helps support our conservative news here in Colorado. Thank you so much for tuning in.